I can't tell you how many times somebody's come up to me and I tell them I'm a marine biologist, like, oh, I want to work in marine biology. And I'm like, oh, what do you want to work in? Like, I want to work with sharks. I want to be in shark conservation. That's great. How do you do that? You know, is there a really good template of how to follow that path? No, there isn't. And that's what I've discovered by co-hosting the Beyond Jaws podcast with Dr. David Ebert. We talk to shark scientists who've been in the industry for decades. And one thing that I've noticed is they all have the same thing in common. There was no straight path to where they got to. It was all meandering. And you're going to hear an example of one of those interviews with Dr. Oscar Sosa, who is a shark researcher in Mexico, who ended up doing his graduate work in Japan and came back to Mexico to lead some of the great research that's going on with sharks and shark tourism in Mexico right now. So you're going to hear on this episode. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking, say it with me folks, action. That's what it's all about. Calls to action and doing something to help protect the ocean. And one of the things that you can do to help protect the ocean is work in marine conservation. That's probably, I would say, the most extreme thing that you can do. Now, let's be honest that if you're listening to this and you're not a marine biologist or you're not in conservation, at one point you want to work in the ocean. Don't tell me you didn't watch a Shark Week episode when you were little, or a Jacques Cousteau episode when you were little, or a Sylvia Earle episode when you were little, and you were saying, hey, I don't want to do this. This looks awful. No, everybody wants to be a marine biologist at some point. And you just didn't go through there. And that's fine. You're listening to this podcast now so you can find out what you can do to help the ocean more. And some people actually dedicate their work to the oceans as a job. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful any way you can dedicate yourself to the ocean or do something for the ocean. But those who work in the marine conservation realm know that it's wonderful, it's beautiful, yet it comes with a lot of challenges. And one of those is finding a career in marine biology, in conservation. And a lot of people, when I talk to them, they want to work with sharks. And I always say, I'm like, hey, be specific of what you want to do. Do something that's unique. Do something that nobody's ever done before. And that's what I've noticed with working on the Beyond Jaws podcast with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert, including Dave, who's been in the shark conservation world and shark science world for decades. All of him and his colleagues that we've interviewed have done, and people that aren't his colleagues that he didn't know before, they all had a different path. They all had a meandering path to get to where they want to go. And so what I want to do is I want to prove that to you. If you don't listen to the Beyond Jaws podcast, I don't know what you're doing with your life. I'm just kidding. You can't listen to every podcast, but I thought I would bring you the Beyond Jaws podcast on this podcast, How to Protect the Ocean, because I feel like it's important for you to hear how some of these researchers, how some of these scientists and conservationists got to where they are. And there's one common thread in each of their stories is it's all unique. They all have a unique quality that they bring to the game that made them special. They all followed something very new. The good news is you're probably wondering, because you're probably wondering, well, if they're following something new, they started this in like the 80s and 70s. Now we're in the 2020s and a lot of things have been done on sharks. Yes, a lot of research has been done on sharks, but there's still a lot more to be done. And, Dave at the Beyond Jaws podcast always highlights what can be done, always highlights how much research needs to be done, how much work and just baseline data needs to be had to get this information out. And so that's what you see from a lot of people. They're willing to go after that life, to go after that data, to help the shark conservation world and provide baseline data and provide research and provide conservation initiatives and policy or data for that policy to help protect sharks. And so this guest that you're going to hear today, Dr. Oscar Sosa, is originally from Mexico, went to do his graduate work in Japan, and then came back to Mexico. Life forever altered by Japan in a good way and in a personal way. And you're going to hear about that, and it's wonderful. So here's the interview with Dr. Oscar Sosa. My other co-host is Dr. David Ebert, who's been on this podcast quite a bit. He's also known as the Lost Shark Guy. If you ever want to DM him and be like, hey, I heard your podcast with Oscar on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast because Andrew published it there. He was so thoughtful to do that. I heard you on it. It was awesome. I want to learn more, and I want to follow you on Instagram at Lost Shark Guy. Check that out. But here is the interview with Dr. Oscar Sosa. I am interviewing him with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert. Enjoy the interview, and I will talk to you after. Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. Have you ever wondered who studies sharks in Mexico, what type of programs they have, where they got their education from, and just sort of what kind of sharks are there? You know, we've seen the great white sharks of Guadalupe Island, but we're going to find out a little bit more about fisheries as well as sharks within Mexico, and even take a trip across the Pacific to Japan to find out what kind of research programs they have there, because we have on the program today Dr. Oscar Sosa Nishizaki, who is here to talk about his career in shark science in Japan as well as in Mexico, his home country. And so it's a great episode. I can't wait to start. So let's start the show. In the early to mid 1900s, the only thing people knew about sharks was that they bit people from time to time. Some scientists started to get to know more about the larger sharks, studying their life histories and their fisheries. As the field grew, so did the diversity of fields within shark science. Public interest in sharks grew exponentially as a series of movies called Jaws piqued the people's fear and curiosity for these sharks. More information was revealed about these mysterious animals as the shark science field grew. From exploration to discovery to genetics and ecology, the Beyond Jaws podcast will introduce you to shark scientists of the American Elasmobrain Society and their work to help you better understand these wonderful species and take your knowledge beyond Jaws. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lewin, with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert. Dave, thanks for joining us again. How you doing?
Doing great, Andrew. Got another really just outstanding guest today, Oscar Sosa. He's a guy I've actually known for quite a while, but we knew each other for quite a while before we realized that we'd actually met as young grad students back in the day in Japan, of all places. And we'll talk a little bit about that on today's show. And but he's just a really good guy. He's one of the leading, if not the leading shark researcher in Mexico. Wonderful guy. Collaborated with him over the years, and he's just a really nice guy on top of it all. And I hope you people really enjoy hearing a little bit about what they do, not just in Mexico, but we'll talk a little bit as well about what they do in Japan, his experiences in Japan and shark research over there, which will hopefully be a bit enlightening for a lot of the guests. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one today. He's really just an outstanding person and a really good shark researcher as well.
Absolutely. I think it was really interesting to find, someone from Mexico going over to Japan to get some research done, to get their PhD. We haven't really talked a lot about Japan and their role in shark research, which you mentioned during this episode a number of times, how they had some really great scientists. I'm sure they still do, but at the time they had some really great scientists that you looked forward to meeting, as well as, Oscar worked under. So I thought it was really interesting there. It kind of teased a little bit of maybe we should go out and look for some scientists that shark scientists that live in Japan and work in and around Japan. I think that would be a very interesting episodes. Mm-hmm. But this episode was just wonderful. It was great to see you talking about networking and talking about working to organize a major conference where a lot of sort of big name people that we've talked about in the past have come, including yourself and Oscar, of course. They got to meet for the first time, and I thought that was really, really interesting. So this is going to be a fun interview. I can't wait for you to hear it. So here's the interview with Dr. Oscar Sosa Nishizaki. Enjoy, and we will talk to you after. Hey, Oscar, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to talk about sharks?
Yes, of course, Andrew. Thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, I'm ready. I try to do it every day in my life. So, let's talk. And thank you for the invitation, both of you, Andrew and David. It's exciting and have the opportunity to talk with people from other countries.
I want to welcome everybody to the show today, and we're really excited to have Dr. Oscar Sosa from Mexico today. Oscar is a fisheries research scientist at the Ensenada Center for Scientific Research and Higher Education in Baja, Mexico. Oscar did his bachelor's degree in biology at the Autonomous University of Mexico, And interestingly, he did his master's and his PhD at Tokyo University, which is an interesting story into itself that we'll talk about a little later. Oscar has over 32 years experience at the university. He's mentored 12 doctoral students, 50 master's students. He teaches, among other courses, fisheries ecology and fish population dynamics. He's a past president of the Mexican Fisheries Society. He's a national committee member for the development of standard rules for elasmobranch fisheries, diving, tourism, and whale sharks and white sharks and sport fisheries. And he's also the vice chair of the American, Central American and Caribbean region for the IUCN Shark Specialist Group. Oscar's published over 85 papers. And Oscar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I'm very excited and have the chance to talk in a friendly way to everybody. Thank you.
Just like we're at a conference. I wanted to. We always start off and ask our guests, like, so how did you get interested in sharks and marine science? Like, what? How did you get interested in this whole field?
Okay, well, I was born in Mexico City, so far away from the sea, at 2,000 meters up the mountain. But always, in that time when I was a boy and growing up, Cousteau was had an effect in many people on my generation, Jacques Cousteau. So I wanted to go to the sea and see what was going inside. So when I started to decide where to study, I wanted to be an oceanographer here in Ensenada, where I'm living now. There is a very famous, at least in national standards, a very famous oceanography school. However, because economy in my family, I couldn't make it. So I studied biology, general biology in Mexico City. And then I went to try to do some postgraduates, and Japan was the first country to give me a scholarship. Even my last name, the second part of my last name, Nishizaki, is Japanese. I didn't want to go to Japan actually from the first time, but there was the only possibility to go and study graduate study. So I took the decision, which is had turned to be very beneficial for me in my development. I really enjoy it. But the first thing is that I got my wife from there, who is part of my half of my life, So yes, and give me the chance to work and to have a position very easy actually in that time when I came back.
The whole scholarship for Japan and everything, how did that all come about? Why did you happen to think of Japan?
Okay. Well, when I decided to go abroad and do graduate studies, Mexico was in a very bad shape, economical bad shape. This is the beginnings of the 80s. So the local scholarships were gone. The U.S. scholarships were only focused on economy. I guess that to make better people to work on to shape up our economy, and then I applied to several embassies, to tell you the truth, and Canada, Norway, the U.S., France, Japan, and the first one who answered me was the Japanese embassy, and they say, well, okay, this that's the way that I will go. I was very eager to try to continue studying and doing a graduate studies. And over there, what I study actually is different species of fishes, but I did my PhD on swordfish, the population dynamic of swordfish. So that took me to Ensenada, when I'm working now since 32, almost 33 years ago. And the local fisheries are long line boats. It used to be a drip gill netters. When I found that the most catch was sharks, I started to focus on sharks. Actually, it's kind of didn't I didn't expecting. I was not expecting to be a shark specialist. In the laboratory where I was studying in Japan, there was this professor, Dr. Toru Taniuchi, very well friend of Greg Callier. Actually, I met Greg while in Japan, but I didn't he will send me with other students to clean up the freezer, but the big one. He had a lot of sharks to work on, and he will ask us or give us the order, actually, the Japanese style, when the professor say, do that, you have to do it. And it was a very smelly room, So I hate it because always my clothes, when I went back to home, it was really smelling to sharks or to that freezer, inside that freeze room. So I didn't really like it too much. But Lai took me to start to work with sharks. And actually, there's another stage when he in Japan he was very well famous, and then he asked me to help him to do some studies on bull sharks here in Mexican waters, especially in rivers. As you know that bull sharks go up river, and we went for an expedition to catch bull sharks in the Pacific coast and in the Gulf of Mexico coast, and it was very exciting. I took my wife in once, and it is a very a funny story because we set the net in the night in one small lake in associated with the Grijalva River, and we wanted to catch, and we had to be seated there all night. And the most worry was my wife to go to the toilet, and she was really excited. I mean, he was very worried about it. So I took a bucket and I said, no, don't worry, it's going to be easy. Just pee on this bucket and that's it. But I forgot to put water on. So when she started to pee, he came the bucket start, so everybody wake up, and that just was the end of doing the things very without noticing all the others. But anyway, those are the talks when you are working at the field are the things that you can talk a lot when you are working at the field. And fortunately, we got to bull sharks, and we studied several things. Actually, it was my first paper on sharks. That is a paper on bull sharks of the Grijalva River. So then, working in the fisheries, I continue, and I haven't stopped.
Yeah, and just so people, some of the audience know that Professor Toru Taniguchi is a very well-known shark researcher in Japan. He's very well published, and I don't know, some of the younger people in our audience may not be aware of him, but you should go look up. He's very, very well known. Very well known. He's retired now, and that was your main professor. And he was back in the 1980s. Professor Taniguchi and a number of other Japanese researchers, Sho Tanaka, Kazu Nakaya, and a number of other people did a lot of research, did a lot of collaborations with researchers in North America and Mexico and other places. And so there are a lot of number of publications came out of that, including one special publication that came out in about 1990. It was a joint American Japanese research publication. And so Oscar had a chance to actually work over there. And kind of the funny story is Oscar and I are actually the same age. And in 1985,
Yes.
I'll let Oscar tell the rest of the story, but there was a big important conference in Japan at that time. And Oscar, what happened at the conference?
Well, I was working under Professor Taniguchi Sensei, if you allow me some Japanese while I'm talking. Taniguchi Sensei was in charge in the organization, part of the organization of this Indo-Pacific meeting, Fish of the Indo-Pacific meeting, and he put me to help him in reservations, hotel reservations, and some other stuff, just the basics for run a conference with you have people from abroad. And I cannot remember exactly, but I think that once we were in a meeting, and then I found this kind of a snobby white American guy with a lot of hair. I remember you have gray hair in that time, Dave.
Thank you.
I think.
Thank you.
So came in and I started to complain on something, and I said, Jesus, you're so young and so spoiled. But anyway, well, I have to do it because it's my duty. But that's how I remember you, Dave. And then
Thank you.
I think that after a couple of years, we talked later, and I found the great person that you are and the enjoyable person that you are. First impressions are not so good sometimes, but
Yeah.
maybe you were in a bad mood or something. I can't remember well, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is since that time that we met. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first. And Oscar and I didn't even realize we'd known each other for many years before we actually shared that story, because I'd forgotten about that. I mean, I remember the conference, but I'd forgotten about the incident. And it was one of that conference in 1985 was the Indo-Pacific Fish Conference. We talk about how conferences are sometimes really important. That was, for me, it was a huge change in my whole trajectory in my career going there. And then, of course, meeting Oscar and some of the really prominent Japanese researchers at that time. And the other thing that was really neat about it was hosted by the Emperor of Japan, or he was
Yes.
Akihito, and that was an amazing thing. I was just like, for me, just like kind of out of Prunedale, California, and I'm suddenly in Japan at the Royal Palace, shaking hands with the Emperor of Japan. It was pretty phenomenal.
So you actually like shook hands with the Emperor of Japan at the time.
We had dinner. We had dinner with
the
him.
time to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. We had a complete dinner. Actually,
Go ahead.
Sorry. Actually, he's one of the. In that time, he was one of the world specialists on gobies. These small fishes. And so he had a great book, colorful, imperial money, I guess, very beautiful book. And yes, he was respected about that.
So was that a normal thing, like at your conferences, that he would sponsor sort of the environmental conferences, or was that just, it was that big of a conference that he wanted part of it?
Well, no, that's it was a big one. I'm sure that he had some support to bring the conference to Japan, because all the way that the Japanese were behaving, just to have everything exactly, how the Japanese are, that they need to have everything correctly and exactly in exact time. So he was involved in that, and he was supporting his conservation, or at least the respect to nature. He always was pro conservation. Yeah.
And you both mentioned that, there were some great researchers in Japan at the time. What was the interest? Like, why were the Japanese institutes so interested in shark research at the time? Because I feel like around that time, the US and other countries were starting to just build their programs up. Like we talk about, Dave and I have talked about sort of the Jaws generation.
Yes.
What was it with the Japanese that sort of inspired them? Had they already had programs for decades on shark research, or were they just getting started at the same time as some of the other countries?
Well, if you allow me to answer, Dave, I think that in that time, that big conference was for fishes of the Indo-Pacific, not just shark, but it has an important part of sharks. It has a special session or symposium. I cannot remember. It's the first time I start to see some demographic papers and Asian Grow with Greg Collier leading those, and very interesting information. And certainly the shark studies in the US started to become more numerous. In Japan, they have been eating shark for long, and is part
Oh, I see.
of their life, and of course, because the influence from the Chinese food and the influence from the Chinese culture for fukahire, the shark fin soup, and those that is part of the culture years before. But they start to study, or they used to study as a resource, mostly more with I wouldn't say without the concepts of conservation,
Well,
but it was more like a resource. It's like different
there,
as we see it today.
as I
Gotcha.
as I mentioned, there was a big significant collaboration between, I know, the United States, the National Science Foundation, and the Japanese, because several of them came over. I was a master's student at the time, came over to the United States, to California and other places, and then we had then they had the Indo-Pacific Fish Conference. And one of the things, even though it was a fish conference for everything, they had a whole symposium on chondrichthyans, on sharks and rays. And one of the things, this was always a highlight for me, is that the U.S. government, through the National Science Foundation, sponsored 12 shark scientists from the U.S. to go to that conference. And I, to this day, don't know how I ended up being one of the 12 people they picked for that conference. It's the only way I was able to go. I ended up being, I was the only, I was the only one that didn't have a PhD. I just finished my master's in some, whatever you want to say, hand of God or whatever, but I somehow ended up being one of the 12 people they picked to go. And that really was a huge thing in my career. And then, of course, meeting all the people over there, the connections. Like you, again, Oscar, remember this? Like people like Eugenie Clark and Sonny Gruber.
Yes.
And some of these people. That was the first time I met them. Was at that conference.
Oh, really? That conference?
Yeah, it was very exciting. It's very, very interesting.
It gets back to something we've talked about in a number of these podcast shows, is that these conferences can sometimes be just a huge game changer in a young person's career. And I know it was for me, and I think for Oscar as well, with a lot of the people you had a chance to meet for the first time, including meeting me, but I was kind of nobody at that time.
No. It was fun. At the end, it was fun. It was okay.
Oh yeah, no, it was a good fun. And one of the other people I remember meeting there was at this thing was Professor Mizaway, who's another prominent
yes
shark researcher there, and he had one of my funny stories was from there. Is when we were over at his laboratory, we were going to go out. And he asked us. I think you were there, Oscar. And he asked us if we wanted something to drink, and we were thinking like we're going to go out and drink something because Japanese are very formal and stuff. He says, "Yeah, we go out for something to drink."
Yes.
And so he opens up his refrigerator door, and the place is just like full of beer. Here, grab a beer. So it was so un-Japanese like. So,
but Oscar, you mentioned you were part of the organization of like organizing this fairly significant conference. It seems like for both of you in your careers, the people you're meeting with. Is this something that helped you in your career? Because you were involved in inviting a lot of the guests and a lot of the people that come to the conference. Did you find you were able to network and make a lot of connections because you were part of the conference? Or do you think you would have had the same sort of impact if you weren't part of organizing the conference?
No. Certainly it was, I have the two things that I learned from that conference. First, it was that Greg Callier was starting to grow up. He was already a professor there, and he got me interested in age and growth studies. Actually, I finished doing it during my master's degree is on aging, and Dr. Gruber also was another person who I met was talking very excited about what he was doing, and really were two different point of view or things that how to become a researcher. And even I didn't do any charts for my PhD. I always have these two ways of doing research: the completely field work or working field work, but with the specific studies on aging, and so in laboratory and things like that. So I learned about them. Actually, I was in charge to take Dr. Kruger to the Tsukiji market, the fish market, which is the largest in the world in Tokyo. And it was very exciting because he was quite well knowledgeable of of fishes and of course shark species. I really enjoyed that he was teaching me while I was taking through the corridors inside the market. He was with his wife, and we became good friends too. And
Nice.
his wife was very nice. Actually, she was kind of half Japanese or Japanese, and then living in the U.S. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I enjoy a lot, and I learned a
Very
lot
nice.
about it. Um, there was another big shots in the fishery world that Dr. Gulan, who used to work with the FAO and had a different modelings, and I always try to also to try to hear what he was talking about, and saying that he reads 20 papers a day, and then he showed me the way he did it, read the abstract, and then you see the figures, and if it's interesting, go ahead, or just pass it and the next. So it really made a lot of changes for me to how to behave on in the afterwards in my postgraduate studies that I was not done in that time. Yeah, certainly it was
Nice.
a seed on my
Nice.
career. Yeah,
How long did you live in Japan for? How long did you live in Japan?
7 years. I live 7 years. I have to live half a year in Osaka, studying Japanese in an intensive course. A bunch of foreigners were in that Osaka University of Foreign Language, and they gave us an intensive course. They all of us, about 300 students from abroad, with the scholarship from Japan. We were really doing our research, our studies, and then we went to several universities. It's the time that Japan start to bring foreigners to, I guess, as a politic to open more
Mm.
their minds at the university and start to lose a little bit the the strong Japanese spirit, and try to be more foreigners. I mean,
Right.
more international, I think.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
Yes.
Get
yeah,
people to get used to the country and offering them language. I mean, that's a great opportunity to learn a different language, like completely
Yes.
different language, right? Yeah.
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
that's an
yeah.
amazing
Tell me
thing.
about it. Tell me about it. Yeah.
Do you still have can you still speak Japanese?
Yes, I have to do it on a daily basis. My wife is Japanese, and
Ah,
so
gotcha.
we usually we decide to have Japanese at home because our son, to be bilingual.
Very
He has
nice.
the both nationalities, so just for that we did it, and yeah, I'm still doing it in very bad
Fantastic.
shape these days. It's my God, it's a little bit, it's getting a little bit rotten. It's yeah.
You need
But
to go
anyway,
back to visit. You need to go back to
yeah,
visit so to get
that's
back
right.
into
Yes,
it.
yes,
So
certainly.
after you lived in Japan, did you go back to Mexico to work or do a postdoc, or what was the next step?
Well, I had the offer to stay in Japan for a postdoc, but I got the position here in the center. I have been working for 32 years. And as I say, my students, position kills postdocs,
Yes.
So you have to go to the position. And fortunately, I got this, and I have some experience of the on the fisheries or as I said, the swordfish fishery, it was developing here,
Yeah.
and it was very easy to get
Is,
involved with the
is
fisheries.
your wife in
in
the
here.
field at all? Is your wife into fishery? Does your wife study fishes or marine biology?
No, no, no. She's a nutriologist, and I'm. If you see my face, I'm her worst case in nutriology. You know, so so it's she cannot control my weight. So I told her always that she's not a good nutriologist, but it's my fault actually. But yeah, she's a nutriologist, and she used to work in the health center of the university, and we met at the swimming pool and she was in a club that eventually I enjoyed, and we met in that club, swimming club, and we start to date, and since then, yes,
Yeah. So now she lives in Mexico with you, I assume. So
yes,
did she
yes,
have trouble finding work? We talk about this a lot when people travel with their partners and
yes.
go abroad. Was it difficult for her to find work in her field, or was she able to?
Well, she was really wise enough to think, how we actually herself, because I came 6 months before we married,
Right.
and I went back to get married. But she was wise enough to start to study Spanish first, and then how to teach Japanese to foreigners. So now that
Oh,
after we she decided not to work some years until we have our kid and he was
right.
older enough. She started to teach, and she has been teaching Japanese here in the
Oh,
local
interesting.
university. Yes,
Very
she's
nice.
she's Hideko Sensei.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
So what
yeah,
if for the swordfish program, what
yes.
type of research or what type of work were you doing on swordfish?
Well, in that time, very few studies were done here in the actually also in the U.S. part, for biology. So we start to study some reproduction, Asian growth, and the fisheries itself, and try to understand. In my PhD, I propose a structure of the stocks in the North Pacific, and I try to answer that with my students with genetics, with the help of some other professors, and try to study the structured population in the North Pacific. And we have some couple of hypotheses there in the literature about it. But as I said, uh, sharks were plenty. Blue sharks were everywhere. And I start to talk with some shark scientists from the U.S. based in San Diego, and one of my mentors, friend and mentor, is Dave Holtz, that used to work in the NOAA.
Mhm.
And we start to, my team, my lab, start to participate in the tagging program that Dave in the NOAA laboratory had in that time. They had it for almost 13 years, tagging sharks and mako. And they had one cruise, a yearly cruise for tagging, and always every year they invite one from my laboratory or two, depending. If I wanted to go, I can have one spot and one student. So I have a lot of support from people like Dave Holtz that uh, uh, helped me a lot in my career. And then eventually I start to get involved with the American Elasmobran Society, with Greg Canier, with Dave Beaver himself, and some other people that
Mhm.
have helped me a lot.
Mhm.
And in the Mexican side, my program, my laboratory start to grow very fast thanks to today's Dr. Leonardo Castillo, that he came to study and do his PhD. And but he has a lot of knowledge from the southern part of Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. And he was my student, but more than my student, he was my professor in several things about sharks. And I'm very grateful for him to decide to come to my laboratory. And that tempo started to really speed it up, and that's how I really got involved in sharks and fisheries. shark fisheries. Actually, more focus on that.
Were you involved? Weren't you involved with the? They had that project back in, I think it was the late '90s with it was with Greg Kaye and I think Bob Huter and a few people. Like they studied basically the Gulf of California sharks in different areas. Were you involved with that project?
No, I was not. I know that they wanted to invite me, but they were enough people to be working. But they were very gracious to ask me to review the project and give an opinion. And then when the report was done, I had the opportunity to review the report, and it's a great job. To tell you the truth, it's one of the greatest jobs on sharks that I have seen. Actually gave a lot of basis for the development of shark science in Mexico in one side, and the other is that it gave us the chance to have a baseline to compare with.
Right.
Unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity. I have tried to get the money, but I have been not successful to try to do it similar way or maybe in a smaller scale, because they really cover all the whole Gulf of California. Do it in a small scale and try to identify the main places to compare how has changed the what they saw and what is now. Almost 20 years. No,
Yeah.
more than 20 years that they did the study. It was 1998, 1999.
That'd be
The
definitely,
field
that
work.
would be very interesting
Yes,
to find out
yes,
about.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to elaborate for people that may not be familiar, they did back in 1998, 99, they did a very intense survey throughout the Gulf of California, the whole area, with some of the U.S. and Mexican researchers, and provided, as Oscar said, a lot of baseline information on the whole fisheries, the species, the composition. It was an incredible study they did, and it'd be really interesting to go back 20 years later and compare with what they're catching now compared to back then.
During that study originally, did they discover new species that hadn't been found before in the area?
I don't think it was I don't know if you are aware, Dave, but as far as I can remember, there was not so much uh, new finding of a species of sharks or rays.
Right.
Maybe rays, they didn't recognize them because there are some that were described later, and maybe they started with
And
so.
I think there were some species that they didn't know occurred there that do occur there. There were known species, but they didn't know that they occurred there in some of the stuff. And
yes,
and they learned a lot about the fisheries in that area as well, which was it was kind of a really a good example of kind of like to do a good field study on just surveying fisheries in different. You can use that template and go other places in the world just to see if you could do a similar type of study to get a real good idea on what species are being caught and landed and everything. But it was a pretty phenomenal study, and I know there's published reports on it too. And the reports are in Spanish and English, so if you can get them in both to read up on if you want. If you're a researcher is interested in that, a young person, that'd be a good study to find out, to get copies of that stuff. I was gonna say, so kind of since though you've had quite a few of your students have gone on and worked on sharks and rays. What are some of the projects that you've had your students working on?
Okay, right now we have switched a little bit to some other species besides sharks, because there is a need in the. I have been involved in the natural protected areas. However, about sharks, we have been working on trying to understand in the recent years about the white shark and the population dynamics in the Pacific coast of Southern California all the way to Baja, all Baja, but mainly up to Vizcaíno Bay, which is in the central part of the peninsula. We have been working on that, and also we have studied some chemical geochemical aspects of vertebrates from white sharks, juvenile white shark caught in the Pacific coast and in the Gulf of California. And we have found that there is a Mary, we are certainly, unfortunately, the sample size is small, but we are certainly that there are some white sharks that are born in the Gulf of California, which is quite exciting to understand. So that's one part that we are doing, and also we are trying to reconstruct. It's something that I have to be done. The catches from the CITES species, not the new ones because they these are more a new number right now, but the ones that were before Panama, the reconstruction of the shark catches of these CITES species for the whole Pacific coast and for the whole country, which is a technique that you have to do it the way like making history, like historian, to understand how the species composition changes have been done. As you might remember, Dave, or that in Mexico the statistics are recorded as sharks and small sharks, large sharks and small sharks. So in order to make the species composition, we have to go to all these studies that scientists have done, biologists or even bachelors and graduate students have done in the field and report in their own thesis or in the papers afterwards the species composition and try to figure out that in certain time and bring it up to the past. And that's why that study that we were talking about is really a needle point to go at least up to 1998, 1999 in the Gulf of California, and then go to more to the past. And that's quite exciting, and you have to review a lot of literature, and this is what we have been doing in recent years in my lab, try to understand better how the fisheries grow, if there were changes on the species composition, and then try to see how we can assess today's populations, which is quite hard. It's not an easy task, but we are trying the best and doing some models. We have applied a model in angel shark. It worked, I think, and so we are trying to understand. As you know, Mexico is a country that we are an important country as a shark fisheries country, and we eat a lot of sharks. Most of the production that we do, we eat them, and actually, some years we need to import sharks from other countries to satisfy the shark market. So that's one of the main challenges I have, because I have worked with species like a whale shark and white shark that are really protected and very important for the conservation, and you have to work with some other species that are important for the fisheries, and try to understand both worlds is quite a challenge, and try to make the science to help in having both worlds is a complete challenge. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they are against each other. But that's exciting to be working on sharks in a country like Mexico.
How was it work? You developed some of the policy for like the tourism for white shark diving and whale shark diving?
Yes, the standard rules for the whale sharks mostly. I was in the group. It was a group work. It's not myself, but yes, I have a lot to do with both. In the case of white shark, my major involvement is that white shark in Guadalupe Island. Guadalupe Island is a biological reserve, so it's a natural protected area. It's not just marine; the island is also protected. And there were several rules that were developed through the years, and I helped some to develop some. And by this is we start to try to understand the white shark population in Guadalupe Island. But recently, last year, the federal government decided to close the Guadalupe Island for the diving industry. There are several reasons, but one of the main reasons is that uh, the local fishermen, they said in the island, they fish for abalone and lobster. And when they are fishing for abalone, they start to feel afraid of of a shark attack, even it hasn't happened for several years. But still, there's a human reaction, and they were worried. And the industry was pushing a lot with the governments that were before the island in Mexico, the federal government, and they kept allowing the industry, the shark diving industry. But today's government is more is a more kind of social government and pro people that haven't been here, so they give it a chance to speak and be more present in the decisions, and they took the decision to stop. At the end, what is happened is the sharks are more protected, so they internationally they cannot complain about it, and unfortunately, it was one of the best places to dive with white sharks because of the view, the clarity of the water. But that is gone for the tourists by now. So I don't know if it's going to be forever, if there is a change of government and you can switch. Maybe, it's kind of being in your country. The Democrats came in and make a lot of changes, and then the Republicans came in and make a lot of changes. So something like that might happen, but you never know. But by now it's closed. And but it's interesting this because one of my I start to complain about it because most of the science that was developed was associated with the industry, because scientists will go in the boats, the diving boats, and then help have being helped by them to be present, and several that was the approximation for doing this. If you stop that industry, the scientists cannot go. The only way to go is by airplane, which is costly and is not is the flights are not so much allowed. It's very
Yeah.
restricted, and then you have to go by a navy boat. So it goes 1 month, and then they leave you there, and then the next month they came for you, and then, no, this
Wow.
kind of
That would be a little difficult.
yeah,
Yeah.
it turned to be a little bit difficult. But what I'm pushing now is that we are going to have a workshop to try to to develop the how we can do science in today's conditions, and keep tracking of the white sharks, and see if what is the effect of stopping the industry. And I hope it's going to be everything positive, but we have to show in certain way with numbers and
Yeah.
data that what is happening. So it's very exciting. It's you need creativity. I'm trying to. So we will have a workshop at the end of next month, or the end of May. We haven't decided yet, with a couple of people. Chris Lowe, I'm trying to get him involved in here, and then some other scientists, Mexican scientists that have the experience of working in Guadalupe Island, to think about how we should do the science today, with the new techniques, with the
Yeah.
new
Right.
technologies. So it's a very nice challenge. So I'm
Yeah.
pushing to do
So
so.
is that kind of what you see going forward in your career, is doing some of that type of research with like white charts and some of those?
Yes, yes. I think that as you say that I don't know how do you feel, Dave, but I'm thinking I'm almost at the end of my career. I want enjoy some other things. but
I get that.
this is so. But yes, I would like to see a program of the starting at least the program of white sharks in a different way, independent of the diving industry, just to see and to understand better that population of Guadalupe Island. There is a lot of connectivity with Southern California that we didn't know, and of course, is our potentially is the most southern potential site that has been conserved for the white sharks. If we have a global change and switch of the species northward, and maybe after we start to go northward, maybe it will be the last frontier for the white shark. So that's
Right.
something that I would like to see. Depending, I don't want to sound dramatic about the global change, but it's something that we have
It's something
to
we're
be
seeing.
aware.
We're already
Yes,
seeing it, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
good.
that's exciting right now.
Yeah, well, it sounds quite exciting with marine protected areas, dealing
Yeah.
with other scientists and so forth. I think it's really
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
For something new to do, what you need to do is start your own podcast on sharks in Mexico.
Yeah, certainly. I have to. I'm not that good, but yeah, there is a lot of young people that
If
ask to come to the lab and have some this you know
yeah,
knowing better the social medias, but yeah.
if if I can do it, you can do it, no problem.
Yeah, I know.
So,
Well, there's nothing like
Yeah.
it'd be great for having a Spanish shark podcast. That's for sure.
oh yeah,
Yeah, yes, certainly,
yeah, good.
certainly,
Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Especially,
one of the things. No, go ahead, Oscar. Go ahead.
no, just let me finish. Especially that we have to teach people that we are eating sharks, but we have to do it in the responsible way,
Right.
and try to understand. So to try to switch, maybe there is a lot of challenges here, and in order to slow down the consumption of sharks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of ask. We always ask our guests kind of a last sort of question here, and this has been a terrific interview. But I want to ask you, like, what would your advice be for someone young or student considering a career in the field, doing marine biology or sharks? What advice would you have for them?
Well, if it was a Mexican I will ask, I will tell him, please don't come to not do not try to work on white shark, and I will explain myself. If you work on white shark, you will be seeing research that has been used the latest technology, the programs, all this fantasy that is around of the white shark. The great challenge is to work in the other species that need to be understood. So my first advice will be try to get an species that has been forgotten in the literature, that where is a lot of chance to understand, and start with the basics, which is doesn't need to have so much complicated technology to understand. That will be my advice, and that will be really for humans, will be the more helpful in order to understand these species. Rays are also very important. We know very few about them, or several of them, so their biology. We are starting picking up. I think it's the same problem across the world. And so rays are also very important and very exciting, even if they are small or something. They are living things that we should understand in order to have a better conservation for it. That will be my main advice to a Mexican, and to an American will be try to understand that conservation is really important, but just to be against the fisheries itself is a big challenge, and be fighting against them is a big issue. is a big burden. Sorry. So keep it down. Try to understand, especially Central American countries, that they need to work on something, and try to push NGOs that work locally to help them, to help the fishermen that are working on sharks, and fishing on sharks, and the NGOs that are trying to make the fishermen to do the things in the right way. Try to push from that side, not just against, because it's not going to work. I think that one of the examples I have is the war that we have against the fishing of Totoaba in the Gulf of California, and the damage that has been done to the vaquita. And always these two wars confronting each other hasn't helped a lot in several years. So we have to move on from that to the other side. I think that there are some papers from people that is leading the shark work in the conservation of the shark work, in the word sense, and that have understand that, and that are switching gears of the approach that you have to work for the conservation of these species. So that will be my challenge, my advice. Sorry, and that's the
Perfect.
challenge for
That's
us.
great.
Yes,
That's great advice.
Great
That's
advice.
really good advice, Oscar.
Yeah.
Oscar, this
Well,
has been
Oscar-
really great having you on the program here. It was really just been for me, it's kind of like going down memory lane a little bit with our Japanese stories.
no,
Oh, I was just about to say, it's been great to listen to those stories and to share them with our audience. You know, we want to thank you so much for all the work you've done and continue to do, and to share that with us was a real pleasure. And we'd love to have you back on the podcast at some point to dive deeper into your research and into your programs that you've done before. But it's been such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
No, the pleasure is mine, and really thank you to give me the opportunity to talk with a broader audience, and really, yes, I will keep it in order to be for you to give me another chance to talk about it, and I will be delighted to do so. Thank you very much, and
You bet.
nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar.
Thank you, Oscar, for joining us on the Beyond Jaws podcast. It was great to have you, and I can't wait to have you back on to talk more research in Japan as well as in Mexico. Dave, what were your highlights of the interview?
Well, for me, clearly the highlight was going down memory lane with Oscar about Japan, because that was, I think, for both of us, that was such a seminal moment in our careers. And as we mentioned during the interview about how conferences can be really important, and I think for both Oscar and I, that one in particular was just the people we met. We then dropped some names. Eugenie Clark, who I know we both met for the first time. Sonny Gruber, we met, and then a highlight for me, and I think Oscar as well, is that we had dinner with the Emperor of Japan at the Royal Palace.
Unreal.
I might add.
Unreal.
And we didn't add in was that we actually we met him twice, because he hosted the closing ceremony at some big fancy place in Tokyo. And I got to meet him again and shake hands and talk for a brief few moments with him. And it's and I'm just like some kid out of Prunedale, for crying out loud. And I was suddenly found myself being 26 and like having dinner with the Emperor. It's just not the thing you think about. And for Oscar, being from Mexico City, I think it was the same thing for him, just having a chance to actually meet somebody. And as he pointed out, that the Emperor was a very accomplished goby biologist. Actually, he was if you're in the field at all, he doesn't do sharks, but he's well known in the ichthyology world. And so it was a pretty
perfect, right?
Yeah. And we talked about some of the Japanese had some really outstanding shark researchers, and I don't know if because a lot of them are retired now, and I don't know how many of the young people go to like an American Elasmo break meeting know some of these people. I know one of the people who's a real outstanding one who is a younger researcher is Atsugo Yamaguchi, who's a real outstanding person, somebody we might want to have on the podcast as well to get someone from Japan over here. But a lot of the people we talked about are actually retired now, or some are deceased. But you go to the literature, and a lot of it is in English. You can find it in English, and you should get to know who some of these people were. And Eugenie
Yeah.
Clark, who a lot of people do know, had a lot of connections with the Japanese because Eugenie was part Japanese herself. And so she had a lot of connections with those people. But just a wonderful interview for me, just going to say, going down kind of memory lane with Oscar on some of those memories we had shared together as young students.
Yeah, I find it interesting. We've had a number of guests on who have that experience of going to another country to do graduate work. And I always find it interesting because, I never really considered that. I did graduate work in Canada, but I never considered, I considered going to the US at some point, but I never considered going overseas. And I just think it's always at an interesting point of your life. A lot of people who do graduate work are usually in their early to mid 20s, maybe late 20s. You get the odd person who's in their 40s, like 30s, 40s, and 50s, but most of the people are in their 20s. So, they have that ability to be able to go and live in a country like New Zealand or Australia or Japan or, Argentina or Peru. And I think it must be a great experience not only from a scientific point of view, an academic point of view, but it must be a really interesting time of your life for a life experience, just in general, and to sort of open your mind to, how other countries do research, where they are in the research of that particular topic that you're going for, whether it be sharks or fisheries or marine mammals, whatever that might be, sea turtles. I just think it's a really interesting thought process to say, hey, I'm going to go abroad, wherever that might be, and then be able to learn and sort of adapt to a new country and learn within that new country. Not an easy thing to do, mind you. I can't imagine that an easy thing to do. And I don't know I know, like, even being somebody where English is my first language, going over to an Asian country and learning that language is pretty difficult. I don't know what the translation for Spanish and Japanese for Oscar was. We didn't really get a chance to ask him, but what I thought was interesting is that university sent him to a different university for about 6 months to learn Japanese, because they wanted students to enjoy their time in Japan and really get to learn about the culture. And the way you do that is speak the language. And I thought that was really nice of the university to provide that outlet for people to learn the language, because obviously it's not an easy language to learn for English or Spanish speaking people, or other languages as well. So I thought that was a pretty cool part of the podcast to learn that. And I think it'd be interesting to see the audience members, if you guys want to get a hold of us, and tell us if you went away for your graduate work, what were the challenges and sort of the highlights that you had in there. You can hit us up on Instagram at Beyond Jaws Pod. And Dave, if you want to hit Dave up individually, it's at Lost Shark Guy. I just think I think it would be kind of cool to hear what people think about that and what their experience was like. But other than that, that's the end of the episode. And I think it was a really great episode. Thank you again to Oscar and Dave. I thought it was really cool. You guys are the same age, and hearing all that kind of stuff, that was really cool. I love that.
That was good. That was a good one. It was really one of those. Definitely, it was a memorable interview for me, and I hope people find it as interesting as well. And definitely hit us up. Give us your experiences on if you did a graduate degree overseas in another country. Hit us up. We'd love to hear your experiences.
Absolutely. And of course, share this episode with your friend. We'd love to, with your friends and family, if you want to know more about shark research and what it's like to be a shark scientist. That's what you come for when you get the Beyond Jaws podcast. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast from myself, Andrew Lewin, and Dr. David Ebert. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you sometime soon, and happy conservation.
I hope you enjoyed that interview, folks, and just the episode. It was not just the interview, it was the entire episode. So I hope you enjoyed that experience. And if you're still with me at this point, I appreciate you. I'm not going to keep you for very long. If you want to join the conversations and listen to the conversations at the Beyond Jaws podcast, you can subscribe. Just look up Beyond Jaws podcast, and you'll be able to find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast app. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. I thought it would be really great. I took advantage of me being away. I'm actually in the Dominican Republic I've been in the Dominican Republic for the past week, and I'm enjoying my time. I'm coming back today on this Friday, and I thought I would leave you with this. One, I needed an episode. Two, I thought it would be pretty cool for you to listen to a Beyond Jaws podcast. If you, all those shark enthusiasts out there, I mean, who's really not a shark enthusiast? I never thought I was a shark enthusiast until I started doing the Beyond Jaws podcast, and I started to understand the different types of sharks. And, you know, we don't just talk about great whites. We go beyond the jaws, and we look at other species, a lot of other species, and we talk about those species and fish, other fish species in that podcast. So if you want to check us out, Beyond Jaws podcast, you can check us out on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, that's it for me today. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you. This has been another episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.